Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I am excited to bring you my guest today, Dr. Dan Schneider. I have seen him, as have many of you, working in conjunction with Father Chad Ripperger, probably the most famous exorcist in our country at this point. But Dr. Dan Schneider is very powerful in his own right. No power is his, it's all God's coming through him. And I've been excited to have him on the show specifically because of this book that he's written that we're going to talk about today. It is the Liber Christo Method, a field manual for spiritual combat. And those of you who follow me know that I'm actually teaching and working in my own area of spiritual combat in the marriage field. So before I let him do any talking, I just want to let you know, who is this guy in front of us? Because Dr. Dan Schneider is an adjunct professor of theology at Franciscan University of Steubenville. He has been involved in teaching and evangelization in the Catholic Church for nearly 20 years. He's a former amateur boxer. And my favorite is he's a U.S. Army helicopter pilot, go military retirees here, and a Gulf War veteran. He's worked for many years in the Catholic apostolate of deliverance and exorcism, both in the diocesan level and as a founding member of the Liber Christo, which is a movement in conjunction with the exorcist I mentioned, Father Chad Ripperger, which provides tools and resources for priests and laity in the apostolate of exorcism. I don't usually read my bios, but I wanted to read that one because it's very important and I think very powerful. So Dan, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on to Breakfast with Bacon.
I appreciate you having me on. I'm honored to be here. I sure appreciate it.
I want to go right into it. You and I got to talk a lot before we went on the air, so I feel sorry for our viewers. They don't get to be there, but so what I know this to be, this book, I mean, we're talking about working with the Liber Christo organization. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
But go ahead.
This is part of the development of the four-phase protocol that Father Chad Ripperger has developed. So this is phase 2, which is basically 12 lessons or 12 steps to uncover areas of where you've got blockages or obstacles to grace in your life. Because ultimately, spiritual warfare isn't it's not a secret prayer, and it's not trick plays, as I say. Actually, my wife coined this phrase. It was during COVID. We were laying in bed and I pulled out this long litany and she said, "What's this?" And I said, "This is the litany of saints to be prayed in times of plague." And she looked at me and she said, "You, my friend, practice smash mouth Catholicism." So this is just blue collar smash mouth Catholicism, how to grind out in spiritual battle. Trying to lay out the rules of engagement. How does the enemy think? How does the enemy work? What are the vulnerabilities? What attracts the enemy to us or to our marriage, to our soul? And how to remove those? Because if you look at the book of Revelation, it says that the devil stands before the throne of God, accusing the brethren day and night. So what's he accusing us of? He has no right. The devil has no right to any soul that is baptized. If you're baptized by right, your soul belongs to Jesus Christ. That's it. In and through the church, that's where your soul belongs. But we give permissions through various acts of the will, sinful acts in particular. So we give permissions. We also have vulnerabilities with any unresolved or integrated, meaning integrated into my Catholic identity as a child of God, unresolved trauma. And so these areas we try to uncover psychological wounds, moral defects, and we try to uncover those and show the reader how to walk through into spiritual victory.
So before we went on the air, I told you about my standers, which are the people who are standing for marital reconciliation. Right. I just saw a client an hour before you, and we were talking about very similar to what you just said. So she's a stander, right? Trying to improve her marriage. And one of the assignments I gave her was to fast for a day, just water, if at all possible. I know we're allowed bread and water, but for me, it ends up being a bread day.
And good bread day too, down at the Italian deli. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. But I said to her, don't waste any of your fasts. I said, always make your fast, not a result, but an efforts towards the answer of a question. So I'm going to fast, Lord. And her assignment was ask the Lord, what is my husband's wound? What is his wound? Because a lot of times we don't know what the wound is, because as you're a military guy, if you don't know what the enemy looks like, then you can't attack it. So was I on track when I told her to do this? Because it sure sounds a lot like this is what you teach at the Liber Christo Institute. So could you kind of speak to that?
Exactly. So it's identifying those obstacles to grace and those areas of woundedness. Now, first of all, going back to your group, the standards in Ephesians 6 in spiritual, in that famous section on spiritual combat, and St. Paul is describing, the police force, the occupying force, and Ephesus of his day. He's describing their military uniform, and he says, "Put on the whole armor of God, so that having done everything, you may take a stand." You may make it. That's a military term, that you'll make a stand, and stand your ground. And so this is part of the spiritual combat, is not yielding, but being enduring in the spiritual combat and taking a stand. And then also by invoking the body through fast, as Jesus, when he encountered the boy with the demon, he asked the Father, "How long has this been going on?" He said, "Since he was an infant." Right. So this affliction is going on for a long time, generationally. But then he says, the apostles ask, "How come we couldn't drive this out?" And Jesus says, this type, this genos, this type only comes out through prayer and fasting. So engaging the body is very critical. Engaging in sacrificial theology is absolutely critical. If you look at the two things. One is Saint Faustina once said, if the angels could envy, they would envy us for two things: that we can receive communion,
that we can
fair
suffer,
enough,
right?
But for our ability to suffer. And so why is that? Because at the essence of the fall, we have to go back to our understanding of angelology. At the essence of the fall of the angels, the angels that were faithful became glorified and had received even further illumination, said St. Thomas. But those who rejected God, at the root of it, it was a rejection of suffering. It goes against the very core of the fallen angel. And so what did Lucifer say? "I will not serve a God, non serviam. I will not serve a God that takes a form lower than me," an incarnate God taking the human form lower than the angels. And so the rejection of their assigned mission that God created them for, that rejection was ultimately a rejection of suffering and sacrifice. And so we counteract the evil one in a very powerful way through suffering. So by offering, especially the merit of a spouse who's, if you offend me and I forgive you, that's meritorious for me, but I have no right or claim or connection with you. But when your husband or your wife offends you gravely sometimes, and we forgive them and offer sacrifice for them, that prayer is more meritorious, and it brings more grace in, especially when you consider the one body union of the marital couple.
Yeah.
So getting those couples to suffer for each other. In our cases, we see oftentimes the demon lingers in the home because one of the spouses, normally it's the man, just refuses to suffer. He refuses to man up and pick up his cross and start offering. And we're just trying to teach them to direct all fire towards your spouse. Every ounce of sacrifice, every ounce is offered up on behalf. Little things too. Remember, Saint Therese, the little flower, at age 14, 15, she goes to the Pope and begs for dispensation to enter the monastery. She was homeschooled. She lived 7-8 years maybe in a monastery, never left. She was completely guarded her whole life. And within one generation, she was declared doctor of the church and co-patroness of foreign missions with Francis Xavier, who baptized millions. They said he baptized so much, he would almost blow his shoulder out. He did so much baptizing. How can this be? Unless there's power in the small sacrifices that St. Therese shows us. And so learning the power of sacrifice and a sacrificial theology is very critical for spiritual combat.
That's why I'm so excited to get you. So again, I'm always going to be putting this up so people can see it. It's huge. It's spiritual combat for whatever these battles are in your life. But what Dr. Dan Schneider agreed with me today is we're going to talk about it specifically in terms of marriage, because I'm an example kind of person. So it helps if we kind of play on this big example. So I'll work with you on this, Jan, but the Liber Christo method has got 4 phases. And then when you get these phases, I can, with you, help me apply them to people who are trying to stand for their marriages. Does that seem fair enough?
Very fair. Yeah.
So what's the first phase?
So the first phase is a withdrawal from the world. We just put it out in an app, so you can do it as a devotional. It's kind of like PX90 for the soul, PX90 for the family.
Only a military guy would know what that is.
Right, exactly. So because most people come to us, they're spiritually flabby. They don't know how to pray. They have no custody of the mind. They never read scripture. And so the very first phase is
PX90 for you non-military people is like this super hard workout that'll like kill your body but make you super strong. So just needed to say that analogy for those who don't know it.
Okay, yeah, I want to drop the military analogy. You might have to translate for me once.
I'll translate. I got this.
Yeah. So it's a 30-day prayer discipline, and here's the logic. We've discovered over time that the demon responds to the imposition of order as much as to the prayers themselves. So imposing order is very critical. How often do we look at our phone and just look at our phone throughout the day to see what we miss? We've all got FOMO, fear of missing out, and we're constantly checking. Or we're so busy, we're constantly trying to keep up on our emails. Because when I travel, I'll go speak somewhere, and then I'll have 3 glorious days where I'm not having to check my phone. It's awesome. But then I'll spend hours coming back, getting caught up on all the emails. And so we're part of the protocol is you're praying at set times every day, 6, 12, and 6, praying the Angelus, the Auxilium Christianorum prayers, a couple of vocal prayers. You're shutting down all the social media. You're using your social media and your phone and all only for vocational purposes. You're not watching Breakfast with Bacon. You're not watching Jesus 911 podcast. You're pulling away from everything. And you're focusing and you're reading only the mass readings of the day. And because little by little, we have to start reworking the mind onto the scripture and penetrating the word of God through prayer. So at first we begin with vocal prayer and little by little introduce meditation and Lectio Divina, because that custody of the imagination, the custody of the mind is very critical. And so the first phase it doesn't sound, it sounds overwhelming, but it's only 6 or 8 minutes 3 times a day. The hardest part that people find is some people have getting out of bed, right? But that's part of the disorder. You've got to get out of bed, you've got to get up and make your bed. You've got to be disciplined. We know this. Well, it's amazing to me is that you have people that are otherwise wildly successful in their personal lives, but when it comes to their spiritual lives or their families, they're radically undisciplined and have no principles. They'll dress to the nines. They'll dress perfectly when they have a business meeting, but when they go to mass, it's flip-flops and shorts and Hawaiian shirt. It's like have the same discipline you apply to the world into your spiritual life, into your family. And so the first phase is and the whole family prays it together. It pulls away all the distractions, and so everybody's focusing on prayer. And after that, and you're also confessing. You're starting to confess once a week. And then the phase 2, if you're going to do the full protocol, the book was written to be used with Father Ripperger and our team and our teams throughout the country, but it's also written for the average Catholic to go, oh man, I forgot about that. I better confess that. I better work on this virtue. You're right. I've got this defect because, and I quote a modern psychologist in here, and I use it kind of by analogy. She has a phrase called, dealing with the emotions, if you can name it, you can tame it. You've probably heard that, right? If you can name it, you can tame it. And it's a modern way of, in modern psychology, it's naming the emotions to tame it. I have anger. I have sexual impurity. I have shame, whatever.
Pride. Yeah.
But I have pride. I have, name it, because we all have them. Okay. So I have this defect, but not just emotionally, but if you can name the defect, you can start to name the demon that's animating behind it or that's attracted to it.
So when I had this lady ask for the wound, she's asking God, name this wound in him, because we can ask for ourselves, and you got to correct anything I say, because I'm kind of asking. So because they are one flesh, she's really asking about his wound, is asking about her wound, because
and his wound is her wound, because it's a one flesh union. Right. And her prayer is very meritorious. The only thing I would add to that is the secret weapon in spiritual combat. I've got them for my St. Michael and the Virgin Mary. That's our secret weapon, and particularly Our Lady of Sorrows. because you remember in the first sword of sorrow, when Simeon prophesied, a sword will pierce your heart, and the souls and the hearts of a sword will, your heart a sword will pierce, and the thoughts of many shall, the thoughts and souls of many shall be revealed. So in the piercing of the Blessed Mother's heart, and we see this happening spiritually at the cross, at the crucifixion. Her heart was pierced spiritually. She died spiritually when Christ's heart was physically pierced. And the union of the two hearts, and the grace that she merited through this first sorrow, it gives her number one, total coercive power over the demon, but also special graces to help souls uncover areas of wounds and trauma. And so going to her, praying a novena at Our Lady of Sorrows to reveal that, offering your bodily suffering for your husband, but also do it in conjunction with the novena. May the merits of this holy novena, of this chaplet of Our Lady of Sorrows, be applied or inured to her, my husband, revealed to him and revealed to me. Help us to understand the trauma, because where the demon holds, he enters through sin, but he holds in wounds, and he holds in heresies. And part of the heresies could be, I'm not worthy of God's love. I was sexually abused, and there's something in me that cannot receive God's love. And so revealing that, having the person come to understand that, is very critical. And we can move the will of another by offering suffering, or we ask God to apply the graces of this suffering, that their will may be moved or move the obstacles, so that their will can grasp the grace that God is offering, the actual grace that God is offering.
That is so huge. I'm actually taking notes. I don't do that on the air usually, but that is something I never, ever want to forget, because that's exactly, anybody watching this having marital problems, I will have people say, well, I want to reconcile, but I can't get them to do it. I'm like, no, you can. You're just making it sound smarter, because I'm like, if you're one flesh, any change you make in you necessarily makes a change in them, because if you're always responding ABC, they're going to respond with DEF. But if you stop responding ABC and you start with QRS, they have to have a new response.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're saying we can move the will of another, that's life-changing for people who are trying to get their spouse back, saying, I can't get, they will to be with the other woman or the other man. But I was like, you can change their will. Say it one more time. We can move the will of another by what?
By offering our suffering and sacrifices to them, that God will remove the grace that's blocking them, because he gives us actual graces. By definition, an actual grace, it's like it's small inspirations or good temptations, if you will, that God offers us to lead us down the right path towards goodness, truth, beauty, and ultimately to him. This is like the Reese's Pieces, of E.T., the little Reese's Pieces that he places. This is the actual graces to lead us home, to receive. So we have habitual and sanctifying grace through the sacraments, but we engage in spiritual combat when we stop telling God how to fix things. Fix my husband, fix my wife, fix my children, fix my boss. Instead, we have to learn how to pray to change the entire construct. So there's two prayers that we put into the book, that my good friend Kyle Clement and Father Ripperger's right-hand man these prayers. The first one is the Light of Christ prayer, because I saw a Baptist church. Let me back up, and I know they always have these clever things out in front, and it said most of us want to serve God, but only in an advisory capacity.
Right.
We want to consult with him. God, this is I need you to fix my husband or my wife, and these are the 4 things you have to do. Here's how I would do it. You do it your way, but this is the quickest way.
Yeah.
So
and I am a CEO and I run my own business, so you might want to take my advice.
I have a PhD too. Remind you, God, we have PhDs. Exactly. So exactly. And the devil doesn't care.
And God's looking at us like,
he's like, really? That means nothing. Yeah. So the Light of Christ prayer. May the light of Christ be upon my husband, that he see himself as the Heavenly Father sees him, and that I see him as the Father sees him. So we're changing the way we pray, because we used to have chaff on the back of the Cobra helicopter when a heat seeker would come out, when they shoot a heat-seeking missile at us that would go after the heat signature in the turbine engine, you could pop chaff and it would pop out at 7 or 8 on each side.
So it had to follow it, right?
So it would follow the heat, that heat source, not take your motor out and make your day very bad. So you
Yeah.
pop us out. And so we're praying prayers for our loved ones, and the demons just pop and chaff, and all of our prayers are getting misdirected. But this prayer, prays from your heart, asking that God would change our construct of how we see things. We're invoking the love of the Father into this construct. So may the light of Christ, through the light of Christ, may the light of Christ be upon my husband, my spouse, and my child, that they see themselves as the Father sees them, and I see them as the Father sees them. You're changing the construct, because the first thing the demon does is change our perceptions of each other. Our perception. When you first get married, you have this, you have to sit together, you have to be touching, you just, you're just, everything's
My
lovey
spouse
dovey.
is the awesomest, right?
Right.
They don't
Oh,
have
this
any
is the
flaws, and that's all
best.
you see.
Yeah. Father Ripperger uses the analogy, and it's funny analogy. The husband hears his wife, and she's got this cute little kind of piglet snort when she laughs, and it's the cutest thing, and he likes to make her laugh just to hear it because it's adorable. But after about 5 years, and 5 years,
He wants to punch her in the nose, right?
he can't stand that. And then when he hears that laugh, he wants to jump off a bridge. What's changed? Nothing. Nothing has changed. She's probably a fantastic human being. The only thing that's changed is your perception. And so what the enemy does is to change our perceptions of each other. So by praying for each other, and praying, not telling God how to fix it, by invoking the light of Christ in that situation, into that wound, by invoking the light of Christ, by invoking the Blessed Mother, then we're going back to original perceptions, the reality of the real perception. She's probably a fantastic human, right? And we always offer ourselves all sorts of excuses for our behavior.
Absolutely.
But we're very quick to not offer any sorts of excuse for anybody else who offends us. And so changing that construct, and accepting any suffering, and willing to grind it out with small sufferings and conforming of the will, is very, very critical. So change that perception. The second one is the judo prayer, and they're both in the book. The judo prayer, what judo is, right? And the last guy that I ever want to fight is a judo guy or a jujitsu guy, because those guys can fight on the ground, and those guys can lay on their back in a guard position. And a boxer, once he's on the ground, is in big trouble. And it chokes and arm bars and all this other horrendous things. And so the judo prayer uses the other opponent's force against him. Remember how the demon rejects suffering at its core. He rejects the voluntary suffering, voluntary, volitional, expiatory suffering. He rejects at the core. The core of his being is a rejection of suffering. And so the judo prayer says, Lord, I'm experiencing X. And it could be physical pain. It could be shame. I'm experiencing the shame of my spouse having an affair on me, having committed adultery, the public shame of it. I'm experiencing emotional hurt. I'm experiencing physical pain, back pain, whatever. If this is not from you and is diabolic in origin, I ask you to send it back to its source with a tenfold blessing. But if you want me to carry this cross, I willfully accept it. I ask you for the grace to carry it, and I offer it up for my husband. I offer it up for my wife. I offer it up for my child who has left the faith. This prayer is very, very powerful, because it now takes, the demon is going to constantly project those images into our imagination, constant projection. When you're dealing with broken marriages, hurtful things, hurtful words, hurtful statements, or maybe physical hurt or hurtful actions of adultery.
Hurtful images. Men, once they even vision their wives with another man, they lose their minds.
Exactly. And so this is why prayer and custody of the imagination is very important, and not looking at the internet or TV or movies in the first phase, because you're purifying your imagination. In the imagination, Father Ripperger calls it our data set. Emotion, it's like this emotion imagination soup. This is what Thomas calls the pre-intellection, the early movements of intellectual activity. But so long as we have the emotion tied to the memory, then we allow kind of a backdoor in for the enemy to start habituating our own thinking and responses. He can habituate our responses to certain events. If we're talking about spouses. If your spouse cheated on you with a blonde-haired woman that drove a blue Nova or whatever, anytime you saw some of those configurations in your data set, in your imagination, the demon can now trigger you an emotional response. So you have to get custody of the imagination, and that only comes through prayer and Lectio Divina, or reading scripture, with the monastic fathers called Lectio Divina, sacred reading of the Bible, of the, reading the daily mass readings, getting connected to washing all of everything that happens to us in the words and deeds of Christ found in scripture.
And all of this is in phase 2 still, right?
Yeah, we're still in phase 2.
So phase 1 was that purification, say these prayers, kind of get rid of so phase 2, if you had to define the phase, it's
a catechetical phase. It's
okay.
Identifying obstacles to grace and catechesis. What we're finding is 90% of the people clean up, especially oppression level, in the first phase. Another 90% clean up just by doing a prayer discipline, reordering their life to prayer, and spending time in catechesis. The original version of this 8 years ago was the Fathers of Mercy had a little trifold, how to make a good confession. You'll see them in the back of a lot of churches, and we had a young woman who had experienced date rape at age 16. At age 26, she now had same-sex ideation. She had hatred of God. She had suicidal ideation. Her life was a mess. A girl from a good family suffered trauma. So we worked her through. The whole family began to pray the prayers together. We started meeting every week on Zoom because she wasn't even in my diocese. So we start meeting on Zoom. And then after about 8 weeks of just going through all this stuff verbally, and then a basic understanding of the faith and a general confession, basically we're talking about a general confession, identifying the wounds, learning to offer your suffering up for your attacker. The family's all praying, father, mother, siblings, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, everybody's praying. The whole family's praying for this person. After about 6-7 weeks, I said, hey, there's a priest in your diocese that I know does deliverance. We've shared cases and consulted back and forth. Go see this guy. He's at Father so-and-so. It's at St. So-and-so parish. So she goes to the parish. Of course, the priest is on sabbatical. It's like, darn it. So there's just some guy there filling in. Some guy, Catholic priest, right? Any Catholic priest. There's not the charism, deliverance, and authority come through office. And so just the sacred office of priest, he says, sure, come on in, I'll hear your confession. I don't know what happened in the internal forum, but she was liberated from a obsession level diabolic affliction after about 8 weeks of prayer, family praying together, some catechetical work, and a general confession. She was liberated and is now married, has kids, very successful in her personal life as well. And her family, her marriage is great. All these things happened just by grinding out and living the Catholic faith. So I hear people say, oh, you guys emphasize the priesthood so much. That's clericalism. That's not clericalism. It's Catholicism, because the priest has that charism to heal, to sanctify, and to rule. And this is what the priestly charism is. And we just try to get Catholics to tap into the sacramental structure. This is very critical in spiritual combat. And this particular case was a blessing to us to realize, yeah, you guys are on the right track. This actually works. It's not theory.
I have like 17 million questions, but so, because one of them was going to be, first we're talking about marriage. A wife can obviously pray for her husband and vice versa because we're the same flesh, but I have parent standers in my group. They're praying for their children to reconcile their marriage. So it's not even me. It's not my one flesh, but I can still do these same things.
Yeah.
Or a child who's left of faith, or can you do it for a neighbor? Can you do it for someone who's not under your hierarchical?
No, it's best to stay prayer. If you're going to, for blessing, lay people cannot bless objects. Even we say grace, bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts. So we distinguish between imprecatory command and deprecatory command. So the deprecatory is may God bless, or may Saint Michael, the Blessed Mother, etc. Imprecatory is I bless, or in the name of Jesus Christ, I bind this or that demon. That to do that, you must have the requisite spiritual authority. That's part of the rules of engagement that are very confused today. We think that, if I'm baptized, I can just drive demons out of anybody and anything. If you work within your familial construct and the authority structure, which I explained in the book as well, there's a chart and everything else, you'll be very safe. Remember, the authority structure has been given for two purposes. There's two ends: to provide and to protect. And so it's under that authority that this is when we stay under right authority, we stay protected. When we work outside of authority, that's when we fall under possibility of diabolic retaliation. So if you're praying for your neighbor, obviously you're not going to bind any demons, but Lord, would you bless them? Let the light of Christ be upon them. Help them in their troubles. Wrap your mantle. I mean, sometimes people say, man, you're in all these diabolic cases and exorcism sessions, but some of the stuff that we hear from the demon, it really, it takes my theological training and just blows it open. Just last month, the priest was doing the litany of Our Lady of Loretto, and he starts calling on, invoking the presence of the Virgin Mary. Now, this is an exorcist. He's just invoking the presence of the Blessed Mother, and the demon says, oh, her, every time you call her, she comes, every time, and she wraps her mantle around you. And so we see the power of prayer, and we don't need to go save those prayers of deliverance for your immediate construct, but ask the Blessed Mother to wrap her mantle around this person or that person. Ask the saints, their patron saint, their confirmation saint. God always sends help from the mystical body. Ask saints specifically designed or specifically that had this charism towards that particular thing they're struggling with. Like St. Mary Magdalene, we were talking about before the show, whenever she shows up, there's some element of impurity. Going to St. Mary Magdalene and asking her to intercede, tapping into the whole Christ. St. Augustine calls the totus Christus, the church triumphant in heaven, invoking them upon us here on earth as we militate against evil.
So if I'm fighting, trying to think of drugs, my child's an addict, you'd find a patron saint. Is there a patron saint or someone who had to? Yeah,
there's Saint Dymphna.
That's right. Mental health.
Yeah, mental health is a good one. Anytime you're struggling with a child, there's of course Saint Monica and Saint Augustine.
Right.
So
do some research and find a saint that had that kind of similar situations, because they have a greater empathy or a greater power over that.
I always ask cases, hey, has any saint cycled into your life lately? And like, oh yeah, I had a guy that young man, he didn't know any prayers. They didn't go to mass, didn't know his basic prayers. He claimed to be, he was like 16-year-old kid, claimed to be an indigo. And the indigos, it's kind of an Illuminati, New Age idea that they have gifts to save the world. And so I said, it's neo-Gnosticism, basically, right? They have these special gifts that only they know and can share with the world. And so I said, any saints cycle into your life? Who's your favorite saint? And here's a guy that doesn't know his basic prayers, not a very intelligent child. He says, yeah, I'm reading St. Augustine's Confessions. Like, wow, St. Augustine's Confessions. If you knew the life of St. Augustine, he was a Gnostic, a Manichae, which was a secret, a cult of Gnosticism where secret knowledge. They find, it's this a cult of secrecy and knowledge, and they have this special. That's what gnosis is, knowledge. They have the special knowledge of God, insights, and the spirit, this secret spirituality, and they're saved through the special knowledge. And here, so Saint Augustine, God sends Saint Augustine to cycle into this young man's life to help battle against this Gnostic demon that he's been dealing with. He constantly does that. St. Mary Magdalene, particularly the feet of Christ. And when you're dealing with sexual temptation, we found it very, very effective to meditate upon the wounded feet of Christ. And what is that? Why the wounded feet of Christ? Well, Mary Magdalene sat at Jesus's feet and anointed his feet. Them. Right. So the feet, and she was at the foot of the cross. The feet is the place of discipleship. It's the place for Mary Magdalene, who in tradition was the woman, the woman the sinful woman of Luke chapter 7, and sensual oils and all these imagery of her sinful past now done in reparation. So meditating on the wounded feet of Christ, starting to attach our lives, not just to prayer, but to the liturgical life, the saints, the mystical body. We bring to bear the weight of the church in our cases, in our own families, etc. So looking for that and asking the help from the mystical body is very, 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 very helpful.
Who's been cycling in my life a lot, Saint Joan of Arc.
Yes,
it's what I do for a living.
I can see why, because again, it's like she's not cycling into my life. I was in the military, but in your life, it's very critical. This is somebody who was strong for God, a female warrior, And so if she's there, God's saying, all right, I'm going to send you some help. I'm going to put a female warrior at your side.
That really helps. Yeah.
Really
because
yeah.
I just everywhere, and then I get a book that I'm going to be doing the author, Kimberly Begg, next week. And she wrote a book about different saints and how we should use them to stories to tell the strength. Anyway, on the cover, Saint Joan of Arc. And I'm going, and yeah, anyway, so that is really powerful to realize how we can use that.
Yeah. Yeah. Saint Teresa of Avila will say, well, I just have this devotion to Saint Teresa. I don't know anything about her. Well, she's what is she? Doctor of prayer. God is calling you to pray. Martyrs, stigmatists. We all hear about Padre Pio as being a powerful intercessor in spiritual combat. We see this all the time in session. But what is it about those who defeated God in the flesh, that suffered the stigmata, in particularly Saint Rita? These saints are very powerful, and they cycle in, particularly when we are called to suffer. Because oftentimes when we're struggling with, we're over here, and I try to go into this in the book, we're over here struggling with some carnal thing, but it's like that. Remember your kids, they may have it now, but the video game was called Whack-A-Mole. And the kids you would hit the mole over here, and then it would pop up over here. So you're over here whacking this carnal sin, but the real defect is over here. So you're over there focusing on this carnal, pornography and all these other carnal related sins. But over here, you've got something else indicating. Oftentimes you'll see sadness or anger. So what is the root of the sadness and anger? St. Thomas says it's oftentimes it's an emotion that comes out of us when facing and confronting with a difficult task. And so when you're confronting with the cross, and so God is calling you to bear this cross, and our response, we're focusing, sometimes it's very carnal. It could be pornography, it could be food, drink, sex, whatever. But over here, the emotional response, we're seeing triggers, but going deeper into some deeper wound down here that we've not yet given it to Christ. When Jesus said to the man with the withered hand, show me your hand, he had one good one and one bad one. And he very easily could have held up his good hand. Here's my good hand. Look, Jesus. We always hide. We want to put our best side forward. God wants us to show us the withered hand.
That's a good point.
We all have it. Yeah.
I want to backtrack a little bit when we were talking about, going to the priests and the people in the order and the structure. I know in my standards group, some of the holiest people I know are Protestants, but obviously they don't have access to the sacraments like we do. And a lot of them I know do their own deliverance prayers. So I know neither of us is throwing anybody under a bus, but, and I think I can fairly say they don't have the same power that we do because it's not sacramental. But you said something that made me think about, should they not be doing that? Are they dabbling in the dangerous, or?
No, because natural law is dictated. So there's natural law, and then divine law, divine positive law. So within natural law, you have natural law authority in your home. The husband is head of household. You have natural law authority, husband and wife, over the temporal goods in the home. So just by natural law, this is why we have, you'll see even Jewish and Islamic exorcists having some success because they're tapping into natural law. And so ultimately, all liberation is self-liberation. At the end of the day, even exorcism, because the person's will has to say, I want this no more, and they have to battle back. They can't just be passive recipients. They must have an active agency in their liberation. So when you're dealing with non-Catholics, they still have natural law authority. They still, by right, through valid baptism, by right belong to Christ. Now there will be times when there is an institutional element to the holding point of the demon. They're often in justice, God will require an institutional response from the Catholic Church, and that authority flows through the local bishop to his mandated exorcist who has that authority. So when there's an institutional element, oftentimes the Protestants will have to pass off a case. But the lower level cases, even the mid-level cases, can, like this woman that had the deep psychological trauma and fallen into a horrible lifestyle, just the family grinding it out in prayer together in prayer discipline, she found liberation. Even good movement before confession. But ultimately, if in Catholic liberation, it isn't to be demon free. That isn't what we call liberation. In Catholic liberation is defined as reconciliation with God the Father through Jesus Christ. And so for us, it's going to have to be sacramental, because that's where the objective graces are being conferred to us. These are the ordinary means. And so we encourage tapping into that, but also tapping in to the authority structure in the home. At the end of the day, and we all like to talk about Ephesians 6, and all the cool spiritual warfare elements that we've got. But whenever I present on that, I always start with Ephesians 5, where it says, wives, be subordinate to your husbands. And in our modern feminine world, those are hard on our ears.
Right.
And so, but that word to be subordinate, it literally is to be ordered under, right? If your husband and I were walking down the street in uniform, I don't know, what was his final rank?
He was a warrant officer. Yeah.
So I would outrank him.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, especially if we're on a naval base, I certainly know nothing about the water, nothing about the ocean. I would be seasick within minutes, right? He's probably better fit than I am. I certainly could grow those sub guys could grow cool beards. I can't grow a beard. He's probably more masculine than me. But if we walk down the street, he stands to my left and one step behind. So everybody could identify the senior ranking officer in a group as you walk through. It just means this person is the first person that the highest ranking officer. And so it just means to be ordered under. It's a military term, but that term also means to be under the protection of. So in a healthy home, the father and the husband should take the children and the wife, and they should put them behind him and hold up his shield, and he's first contact with the enemy. And then St. Paul goes in to explain the husband's responsibility, which we just seem to skip through. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. What, writing a book about the church? Setting up a cool altar? No, dying for her. So the man is called to die for his wife. He's not only the first to engage the enemy, but he's called to an ultimate Christ-like sacrificial theology for his wife and for his children. That's the first engagement. This is all it is. And it isn't about, hey, I'll sit in the closet before mass and I'll be like, I have no idea what to wear. And my wife will go, wear this, this matches this matches that. That has nothing to do with spiritual authority. It's how the enemy sees you. I see this in session in cases of possession. The priest lays his priestly stole on a possessed person, and there's a huge bodily reaction. The husband lays his hands over and imposes hands on his wife. It gets the same reaction. The demon responds to that. He recognizes this as one of the rules of engagement. So learning to get that back in order in the home is very critical. He needs to engage. He needs to be, again, the first contact. But I've heard this before, and this is why I beat the crap out of men. And I'm telling them, look, if you're playing video games, you're looking at dirty magazines, you don't make your bed, right? You're not a man, you're a boy. And I know many women that said, I have no problem following a man, but I cannot follow a boy. And
Exactly.
That's a problem. That's a problem. So that order has to be reestablished. We have to go back to G.K. Chesterton. Remember that contest? He entered a contest that said, "What's wrong with the world?" A contest for a local newspaper. And he answered this: "What's wrong with the world? I am. Nice. So what's wrong with my marriage? I am. I'm the problem in my marriage."
Which is deep humility as well. So you have to
humility.
lose. Yeah.
Well, St. Augustine said this: there's three things, if you want to grow in holiness, there's three things you have to have. Number one is humility. Number two is humility. And number three is humility. It's like location.
Yeah.
Humility. You want to fix your marriage? Be humble. Humble yourself. It's very difficult. I understand. It's very difficult.
I know.
But this is spiritual judo, because, and I've told people, I was in Germany 2 weeks ago, and 3 different people showed up and said, "Hey, Dan Schneider's in Germany. I demand to see him." And so this lady, she's been prayed over and all of this. And I finally, for years, said, "Look, what do you want from the church? What are you willing to do?" "I want to be liberated." "Okay. What are you willing to do?" "I'm willing to do anything." "Okay. Number 3, what is the definition of insanity?"
Doing the same thing over and over again.
Exactly. And expecting different results. So, if you keep on doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep on getting what you've been getting. So learning to change things up, and a sacrificial theology and self-offering and humility. These are things that we just seem to ignore, but these are key elements of spiritual combat.
We could keep talking about this, but we got to get through the other phases. What's in phase 3?
Well, phase 3 is specifically for prayer. So once you get to phase 3, we're now working with the local parish priest, and they're doing minor exorcism prayers. So oftentimes, and
Most people aren't going to need it, is what you're saying.
No. Again, that's why Father Ripperger put this statistic in the introduction to the book. The last year they took statistics in 2015, they had 600 authentic, what they could deem authentically diabolic activity. And of those 600, only 3 were actual cases. So 1/2 of 1%. The rest just needed some help, but the bulk, and some went to prayer, only about a third continued to the end because it takes work. So a small number actually has diabolic, I mean, like to the point of possession. And so,
Right.
and so those numbers are very, very, very rare. So very few people. By the end of they finish phase 2, we cycle them back, either back into pastoral care, back into the mental health professional. We've had many cases like, look, you're doing great. You're back in the state of grace. You're getting good progress with your counselor. Keep working on your counseling. You don't need to be prayed over. And then about a third end up going through for minor exorcism, and they get cleaned up just through a little bit of push. And then phase 4 is the formal rite of solemn exorcism, which is extremely rare.
So who would want this book? Every single person who wants to unblock graces in their life, right? I mean, so who would you,
Right.
Have you seen like greatest, like this group of people or this group of sinners, or is this just around the board? I mean, what kind, okay, let's just go with this. What successes have you seen by people who have used this? Like the one you gave us already.
We've had a lot of successes of people that have done this, that said, I don't want to, I don't want to do this stuff. If you want to pray over my wife or whatever, I don't care. Don't engage me. But once they start reading this, and particularly military people that have done combat sports, because I use a lot of analogies. I quoted, Chesty Puller, the famous Marine, we're surrounded. That simplifies the problem, so no matter which way we shoot one of the enemy. So I use military analogies for people to understand that this is combat. But in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it says man's history has been one of dour combat. It didn't say that if you have some problems, you're into combat. We are born into combat. This is why in confirmation, if you recall, when we were kids, the slapped you.
Soldiers.
He gave you a little slap on the cheek, like, wake up, you're entering into spiritual combat. And so, yeah, we're using this with our protocol, with our cases that have come, our diocesan teams are using this, but I also wrote it with a general audience in mind, because, for example, when I was in Desert Storm, we had a tank battle, right? We were tank on tank. It was a huge tank battle, artillery, tons of artillery. And we largely, except for the Republican Guard, most of the Iraqi divisions had T-62 Soviet era T-62 tanks. And the T-62 tanks had a gas tank, external gas tank on the very back. So guess what we did as Cobra helicopter?
Right.
You flank them and you hit the gas tank, you take them out. We know their vulnerabilities. So what I try to do in the book is to show our vulnerabilities, to teach us, hey, this is how it works. I was deer hunting a couple of years ago, and we're in the desert and it's all brown. And we're up on horseback, right? We're on horseback, deer hunting on horseback with primitive rifles, and I can't see it. And my buddy with me, he's experienced, he can see, I can't see anything. And he goes, there's one out there about 300 yards. I'm like, I don't see it. He's like, there it is. Look down my arm. So I look down his arm and I get the binoculars out and I don't see anything. And all of a sudden, a little fly or something landed on his ear and it twitched. And that ear twitched. And at the ear, the inside of a deer's ear is shiny. And so once that shine hit the sun, a little sparkle, the entire outline of the deer came, and I saw it as clear as day, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. So part of the book, the logic of it, is try to get people to start to see the obvious. This is where the enemy works. This is our own vulnerabilities. These are the areas that we need to work on for you to become more free in Christ. That's what Liber Christo means, the free man in Christ. How can you find more freedom, interior freedom from the diabolic, yes, but freedom for union with Christ. And so that's the whole point of the book. And so we try to walk through areas, unforgiveness, identifying areas that we've made bad decisions. We've participated in evil. We've gone and done the seances or all this pagan stuff that we just people do just haphazardly now because we're desperate, because God doesn't answer us quickly enough. So we fall into witchcraft. So how do we undo those things and take back those privileges that the enemy gave us? But the first thing you got to do, you've got to see it first. And so the book is walking Catholics or anybody really to see these areas, because truth is truth, and identifying the areas where the enemy's working.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, I'm going into this book thinking I'm going to fix my kid or I'm going to fix my spouse. And it really is helping me fix me, which in turn fixes them, or,
Right.
Works towards that.
Because most of us are praying, most of us pray in desperation.
Yeah.
Somebody told me I was so worried about my child that all I did was pray. I was like, you didn't. It was one or the other. Prayer and worry cannot occupy the same space. Down in the Southwest, in ranching, Texas, in the Southwest United States, they hunt. It's legal to hunt coyotes. People get upset about that, but it's legal because the coyotes deplete the livestock, the big game population. They're predators. They're high-level predators. They'll wait till the calf is being born and they'll attack the mother cow and the calf. I mean, they deplete the population. And so the ranchers will allow hunters, or they'll hunt themselves. And you can download an app on the internet, and it's called the Predator app, I think. And there's multiple ones, and it plays the sound of a dying rabbit, of a wounded puppy, and so hunters will project this sound into the ranch, and the coyotes will start circling around, and they'll actually rush into the camp where the hunters are and get killed, because they're so drawn by bloodthirst to the sound of the prey of a dying rabbit. So when we're praying like that, out of shame, out of agony, out of fear for our child or our marriage, yeah, God hears those prayers, but you're projecting a sound of a dying rabbit, and it also attracts the enemy to us, because a psychological obsession, this is a key point, a psychological obsession can develop a spiritual oppression. And so that psychological obsession over a broken marriage, or psychological obsession of addiction, that projects a woundedness into the cosmos that attracts the enemy.
And that's where Satan comes in.
He'll quickly take advantage.
Through your wound.
Look, if you watch the Discovery Channel, the lion is over here, and he's just kind of chilling out watching. And here goes the herd of wildebeest. And he doesn't go after the alpha wildebeest. He could take them all out. He could take out the biggest one, but he goes after the one that's straggling, the one that looks a little wounded. He's an opportunist. He goes after the wounded,
the easiest one,
for the easiest kill. And so when we're in a point of shame or fear, a lack of trust in God, and we're praying from that unholy place, God hears that. I'm not saying we shouldn't pray, but purifying those emotions with a sanctified vision and faith, when we're praying from that negative place, we attract the demon. And so a psychological obsession can expose you to a spiritual oppression. I've seen this happen in the field.
Wow. I mean,
there was a woman in a small town, a woman in a small town, and she was Mrs. Church Lady, communion minister. She taught the children. She volunteered at the parish. She's just one of the church ladies that did everything. In a small little town, you know how it is. Everybody kind of knows everybody's business, right? This is Green Acres. And so her husband commits adultery. And so in a small town, especially, it spread like wildfire, all the rumors. And she was so filled with shame because of this, and rightly so. I mean, this is a hurtful thing. But she became psychologically obsessed because her image of the church lady was so shattered. She became psychologically obsessed. Within 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, she had a spiritual obsession, a high-level affliction, because she became so obsessed. By the end, she left the church, abandoned the faith, and the enemy quickly moved in on her. And she was legitimately, diabolically, deeply afflicted, and the demon moved very quickly, because he knew she was sensitive to all the rumors and the gossip and the whispering when she walked by, and he starts projecting. Everybody's talking about it. Look at you. You gave your life to God, and now look what you get. Everybody's ashamed Everybody's laughing at you. Your husband
You should just go kill yourself. You're
Go
useless.
kill yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how the enemy, because you lower the shield to the psychological obsession, you lower that shield, the interior shield that protects you. And now the demon is just projecting everything. He's just hammering you. Oh no, you might as well just give up. God doesn't even care. And now that you know you're afflicted, that I'm present, he can't even save you. So don't even bother. But sometimes it takes people years to get to that point, and sometimes it can go very quickly.
Did she get healed?
No, she never came back. So I never know what happened to her. Yeah.
So if people want to contact the Liber Christo Institute organization, would you tell them to first go through the steps in the book?
Yeah, Father Ripperger mentioned in an interview recently, the protocol, and since then, I get about 10 emails a week, or 2 or 3 to 5 a day. The group gets about 800 emails a week of people asking for help, and so we only work with the local parish priest. But you can do these prayers as a devotional. We've got them on the internet now. With you go to the App Store or the Google Play and get the Liber Christo prayer protocols in there, and they could do that. Or if you email info@liberchristo.com, someone can send you the prayer prescription if you want to do it as a devotional, to just try to help reorder your life and just buckle down. It's a little mini Lent, really. You can do it for a week or two to pull back. And if you've ever gone on a retreat, after about day 3, you look in the mirror and you're like, hey, I remember you. You used to be pretty cool. You used to be laid back before the world and all this crust came upon you. So this is just a withdrawal from the world, and the manner you can work through on your own pace as well. There's something bigger there. You need to work. We only can work with priests and take referrals from priests and bishops. But again, most people, 99%, 90%, 95% can really work through a lot of this garbage themselves through the ordinary means that Christ has provided for us: prayer, sacraments, ordering your life to prayer, sacrifice, learning to offer that part of the gospel, the parts of the gospel that we don't like. St. Paul, I rejoice in my suffering, and in my body I make up what's lacking in the suffering of Christ's body, the church. Tells the Philippians, for you has been not to suffer. Jesus gives us threefold command of discipleship: deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow me daily. So embracing this part of spirituality and doubling down on our spiritual combat through a really disciplined prayer life is very, very effective. But you could, so people could do the protocol on their own just for a spiritual discipline and read the book and have a lot of good movement.
Wow. Dr. Dan Schneider, again, for those of you, I would love for you to get your hands on this book, the Liber Christo Method, a field manual for spiritual combat. We've talked a lot today about, for instance, marriage, people who are standing for reconciliation. But if you want to learn how to fight the enemy, we've got it right here at our fingertips. We have the Bible, but sometimes we read the Bible and we're not exactly sure how to clarify that. This is a 4-phase, if you need all 4 phases, instruction and with explanation on how to defeat the enemy. And God provides a community for us as well. So if they want to get a hold of the community, can you tell us the website?
Yeah, www.liberchristo.com and info@liberchristo.com. You can send an email, and someone in the team will answer it.
Okay.
And a lot of it is, I went to one time with a Marine sniper to zero my rifle, and he said to me, next time we go out, I'll show you how you can see the air movement behind the bullet. It's like, wow. He said the real killer on the team is the spotter, not the shooter, the spotter who's watching. Then we went to the pistol range, and we're shooting 45s, 1911s, and he hits his target, 3 perfect shots. My target, I was all over the place. I was a pilot. You know what I mean? I was.
Yeah, you had a big gun, and you had
a big gun. I just blew stuff up. And so I missed a target. He wasn't even looking at me. He goes, "Hey, move your right thumb up 3/4 of an inch and try it again." And I was like, "Okay, Marine, you guys are weird, but I'll do it." And I moved my thumb up 3/4 of an inch, and I had a really good tight shot group. And I looked at him like, "What are you doing? You're a freak." He says, "You're holding your weapon like a revolver. This is a semi-auto, and your thumb is slightly out of place." And he was right. I carried a revolver when I went to Iraq, and so you got that 3/4 of an inch movement meant the difference between hitting your target and not hitting it. So this book is really, I'm trying to give those 3/4 inch instructions, little teeny things, because most Christians are close, but how do we hit our target? How do we grow in holiness? How do we identify the enemy? Small little things, little details that we may not have thought about before.
Which is what's so exciting about this book. I loved it. I love a manual. That's kind of person I am. Give me instructions. Tell me what to do. I can pray and pray and pray, but these are prayers with power. Not that all prayers aren't, but these are prayers with direction. You know, it's spelled out for you, and there is, you know, actual results. We see results from this, like that great example you just gave.
Yeah, we get good results of it, but again, that's why I say all liberation is self-liberation, that we need to be active agencies. And part of that active agency is ceasing habitual sin, growing in thought, word, and deed, because ultimately the enemy is going to find a softer target. He's going to go to the easier target. So just becoming holy in thought, word, and deed, and enduring through, pushing through and learning to glorify God in all things that every aspect of your life, including your marriage, your sexuality, your prayer life, your thought life, holiness of thought, word, and deed.
Your finances, everything.
Finances, glorifying God in everything. I have this aspect, not compartmentalizing my life. It's ordering your life, living a truly, fully Christian life. It radically, because as we know, read the news, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Target, Bud Light, the Dodgers, it's a disaster out there. The enemy is rearing his ugly head. He's not even hiding anymore, openly coming out with Satanism and all these other bizarre things in the world. So we have to counteract with prayer and fully radically embracing. We fight the ancient weapons are best.
I got 2 fill in the blanks just for the sake of time. First one, when I die, I will know my life has been a success if
I love Jesus, if I live the commandment of love of God and love of neighbor. What does St. John of the Cross say? At the end of our life, we'll be examined in our love. And I'm not saying sugary Jesus. I'm talking about a warrior Jesus of sacrificial love. How did I love and stand what God has called me to do, my vocation?
Wow. Second one, name one thing you would have our viewers do differently as a result of something you said today.
Pray. St. Catherine of Siena, doctor of the church, said that everybody should pray. Everybody should pray at least 30 minutes a day, unless they're busy, she said. And then they should pray for an hour. So, awesome. And prayer isn't reading about prayer. Prayer is prayer. Prayer is communion with God, conversation with God. So learning to pray is very important. Shutting out the world and learning to spend time with God. Because the person that doesn't pray, I forget who said this, has nothing at all to say to the world. The one who does not talk to God. So talking to God and learning to pray and grow is the key to holiness. Growing in holiness comes through prayer.
Yeah. Dr. Dan Schneider, I am so excited that I finally got you. You probably didn't even know I was looking for you, but I finally got you on my show.
Yeah, so you hit me with the heat-seeking missile, and I did some evasive maneuvers, but I'm a fast target. I try not to get hit, but no, I really appreciate it. I'd love to come back on sometime.
I've got lots of things I'm going to ask you after we go off the air. How can my people find you? Is it just the Liber Christo, or do you have a website directly for you and your writings and other books?
Just do the Liber Christo is the best way to get a hold of me. They'll get a hold of me through there.
Okay.
www.liberchristo.com.
Bring you in for speaking or anything that you wish to do.
They can send a request through there and they'll get a hold of me for that. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. And are you on social media?
No, I'm not.
Hide from that. That's okay.
I try to hide from everything. I was 2 years ago, I was just working cases, grinding out a doctoral thesis. 10 years ago, grinding out a thesis, working cases, and this kind of developed. So
yeah.
I
have a social media presence, but I pay someone else to do it because I can't. But I'm like you. I can't look at it. It's just
I don't want to do Twitter because I've seen so much
evil, hatred, ugliness.
It's just one big huge platform for libel and distraction. And so I try to keep a low profile and do what God calls me to do. And if He wants me to stand up, I go. I'm a soldier, and I follow our Lord and King, and whatever He calls me to do, I'll do. But so I do some conferences and parishes and parish work, that sort of thing. But
so bring Dr. Daniel Schneider into your parish, into your talk. Let him help you guys solve all the world's problems, just spiritual warfare, bringing God in and doing it in the way God ordered it, because God is a God of order. And get your copy of the Liber Christo Method, and you can get this at Tan Books, I believe, right? Did I just mess myself up? Yeah, tanbooks.com, right?
Yeah, if they do Liber Christo 25, you can get 25% discount.
Okay, excellent. Liber Christo 25. I'll put that in the show notes. So
yeah,
that'd be
just to push your readers to get it. If they're on the bubble, they will say if you can't judge a book by its cover, it's a beautiful cover.
Yeah.
You know, and if it's
and I love the side. I mean, it's all silver. I love all this too. It's really
they did a nice job.
And you got the thingamabobby in it. I'm a PhD. That's a very professional word to use. You know, but your thingy here.
Yeah, the page.
Thank you. Marker. It's a PhD word. The thingy and the page thingy. Yeah. So
you did the Latin.
Right? Right.
The page ribbon. Yeah.
Page ribbon. And all of the rest of you, please like and share this show. We do struggle with cancellation, censorship. Get it out to your friends and family, those who are struggling in areas of their life and they've been praying and they didn't give them the extra power, as Dr. Dan Schneider says, the judo or the jujitsu of the prayer, the ones that are down on the ground that can really take your prayer life up a notch. Let's get these demons out of our lives. Also follow me on, Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, and YouTube, of course, which is probably where you're watching it. You can go to my website, breakfastwithbacon.com, and sign up for my newsletter. Also, come to the Truth Speakers Conference, October 28th. That is the Disrupting the Culture with Truth. Our key speakers are Father Robert Altier. We are also having Doug Barry is coming in to speak about it. Alexis Walkenstein, Christine Watkins, Daniel O'Connor. Go to and myself, of course. Truthspeakers.org. And Kevin Wells. Forgot to mention his name. And get your tickets. They are going quickly. It's going to be quite a powerhouse talk. October 28th in Virginia Beach, and we'd love to see you there. All right. So Dan, I told you how I end my show. I think you remember, right?
Of course.
I am Dr. Christine Bacon. I want to thank you for watching Breakfast with Bacon. And I'd like to remind you always to live your life
sunny side up.
Yes, sunny side up.